So Ash, neither you nor I live in New York or really anywhere near New York, but we were both there a couple days ago for a very special reason, right?
Yeah, it's almost like we were virtually just there.
Oh, well played, sir. Yes, that's right. We were in New York in order to play Labo VR. So we got play for a little bit over an hour, I think, and we got to go hands-on with all the major toy cons and the major games associated with them. So that includes the VR goggles themselves, or Toy-Con goggles, Toy-Con VR goggles, the blaster, the camera, the wind pedal, the elephant, and the bird. So yeah, we got quite a bit of playtime in within an hour. Like, we got to see quite a few things, and in addition, we got to see, I believe it was the reveal of VR Plaza, which is basically 64 pre-built games in addition to the other ones that come with VR Labo, and these are ones that you can make yourself using the Toy-Con or using the Labo Garage. So you can take these games, you can go into the garage with them and modify them yourself in order to see how they work, or tinker with them and turn them into entirely different creations. So that was really cool, and we'll get to that in a little bit. For now, though, I want to talk about just our overall general impressions of our experience with Labo VR before we get into the specifics of each of the toy cons. So Ash, let's start off with you here. So what did you think overall of Labo VR, and what was your experience going into it? Or what was your expectations going into it?
I think I had some latent interest going into it, just because VR is interesting in general. I wasn't expecting too much from it. I think I was expecting something on the level of probably Google Cardboard. I wasn't expecting, of course, anything close to something like PlayStation VR, because that's not what this is meant to be. The price point's much lower. The tech is interesting in the way it all fits together, but it's a lot less advanced. So I was definitely expecting something like entry-level VR, and that's mostly what I got. Although I will say that it was a bit better than I thought it would be. Like, this is not phone VR. Like, this is not like you just holding something up to your eyes, attached to your phone, and it's virtual reality. This is definitely a step above that. I would say it's almost like Nintendo Cardboard, right? Literally, it's cardboard.
Yeah, it is.
And it's Labo VR. So I would say it's basically Nintendo's version of Google Cardboard. I haven't used a lot of Google Cardboard, so I can't quite compare the two directly, but it's definitely above any phone VR you may have tried. And I liked it.
Yeah, so now why is that exactly? Because the way you described, phone VR is basically how Switch VR or Labo VR also works.
Right.
So your Switch in a cardboard box, hold that up to your face, and that is the core of it. But of course, there is more. So I wanted to know from you, though, like, what really separates Labo VR from other, like, phone VRs, for instance.
Honestly, it's probably the physical component, because with the physical component of the Switch itself, you've got the analog stick, you've got the face buttons, the shoulder buttons, and some of the toy or the VR kit games utilize those things. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of cool to have. You're in VR and you're using this VR, stuff that you've built, but you're also, in many cases, not every, but in many cases, you're still holding the Switch itself as well and pressing buttons to play the game. So it's that naturally offers a level of interaction that you just cannot get with phone VR, simply because it's a touchscreen. I mean, it's the same problem you have when playing just playing phone games in general, is that it's not quite the same experience because you don't have buttons you can press.
Right, yeah, you can't touch a screen that you're looking at. So
right.
So yeah, I think you pretty much hit on it right there. Like, I agree with you. This is, obviously, this isn't meant to be a PSVR competition or Vive or any of the other devices. With that said, even though it is, I think calling it entry level is fair, it impressed me. Like, it's better than you might think. I think actually the biggest problem with this is just maybe how I'm not quite sure of the longevity of these experiences. However, the experiences I had were pretty fun, and it really is partially because of that, or really largely because of that physical mechanic you mentioned, where, in the blaster game, you're holding the blaster. With the camera game, you're holding a camera.
Exactly, and like, really, in that sense, it's, the any issues inherent to the Labo VR kit aren't really because of the VR. It's because of the same issues we've had with Labo already, which is, it's a cool concept, and it's really neat and new and fun and interesting, but the actual software, the game part, we don't know how much longevity there is there, and that's really just Labo itself. That has nothing to do with the VR, and as you said, calling it entry level is fair, but it was. I definitely got a little bit more than what I expected, I have to say, in terms of quality.
Right. Well, speaking of quality, that's one thing we need to touch on, and that is the image quality, because that was something that a lot of people were getting, a lot of people were concerned about. How would this look on a 720p screen divided in half for each eye, vertically, I believe. So let's talk image quality. What did you think overall of how it looked in VR? With this, relatively small screen, like right up against your face, with these, in which it uses lenses to distort it so it looks like so it looks like you're like in this virtual world. How did that look to you? Was it convincing?
Well, it was. I have to say your range of view is quite wide. It feels like you're really immersed in it. Like, it doesn't feel like you're looking through a window into a world. It really does feel like you're quite immersed in what you're doing. Now, of course, the image quality is an issue, but that's also a problem that's pretty endemic to VR in general, and it's going to be a little worse here because we're dealing with a 720p screen to begin with, of course. But if you're not experienced with VR and you go in expecting HD quality, it's going to look amazing, you're going to be really disappointed because that's not what this is about. I mean, they do have to split the image quality in half, and that comes with some blurriness. It doesn't always look great, and that's just something you kind of have to accept with VR. But to be fair, that's something, it's less of an issue with something like PlayStation VR, but you and I both have used PSVR, and if you're not playing on a Pro, you get some of that blurriness there too. So this isn't just a Labo VR thing, but image quality is a persistent issue, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's a good thing to bring up. I mean, every VR unit right now is dealing with these same issues, not to this degree. It is definitely it's definitely far blurrier on Labo VR, so I just want to get that out there. Like when I first put it on, I thought it was out of focus or something at first. But once I adjusted, once I get past that barrier, as you kind of have to for every VR unit to some degree, again, a little bit more here than others, it's surprisingly impressive. Like, as you mentioned, the field of vision is broader than I expected. Like, it doesn't feel like you're looking into one of those old school, 80s viewfinders as a kid, right? Like, it looks like you actually are, like, in this virtual world, albeit a low def one. And it's also responsive too. Like, that's another concern that I think some people may have had. Like, because in VR, like, responsiveness is key. Like, it needs to respond as you're turning your head. And it had no issues here. Like, it seemed incredibly responsive. It seemed accurate. Like, I tried to. So when we were playing, we were sitting in these rotating chairs. So you need to spin chairs, so we could just rotate ourselves in without having to stand up or something. And I tried, as far as I could tell, I tried marking points in space where, I would look at one spot, do a full rotation to see if I was still looking at the same spot relative to where I was in the real world. And it seemed like I was. No, I didn't do a perfect comparison, but it seemed pretty accurate. So yeah, so really, it is convincing. It's just low def. I will say too real quick, I did know some pretty heavy motion blur whenever I was turning or moving my head quickly. So I don't know if that's intentional or if that's just a side effect of the Switch's display being used here instead. Wasn't a major issue, but it was something I did notice.
Yeah, I noticed the same thing, but again, not a major issue for me either. I have a feeling that's due to, the way you're using the Switch's screen in general, and probably not intentional, but either way, it's not a big deal, and it didn't impact my experience with it at all.
Right. Well, speaking of experiences, Ash, let's get into the specifics here. And I think let's start off with what might be both of our favorites, or at least certainly one of them, and that is the Toy-Con Blaster. So in this game, like all the Toy-Cons, you're holding the goggles to your face, but at the same time in this one, you're holding a gun, like a blaster, and the idea is you're going through the city, you're shooting down these little space aliens. It's divided into, I think, 3 stages, and it gets even progressively more difficult with more enemies as you go through it. But what really separates this, well, 2 things. One, having the actual gun itself, which has this really cool, you cock it first, right? You pull back, I don't know gun terminology. You pull back on
I know.
You pump it, I guess.
Yeah, like a pump action shotgun almost, I think.
Exactly. And so after you pump it, then you pull the trigger, and that releases something internally, so you can feel this thunk inside the gun itself, and that feels so good. I love that.
It does,
right? I think it's just those. It's like those little touches that almost make Labo VR, in a limited sense, almost more immersive in some, again, limited senses than other VR, because you do get that tactile feedback.
Right, and that's also what kind of propels it above basic entry-level VR to me as well. As we said, this is much closer to entry-level VR than something like Vive or PlayStation VR, but that element of that tactile element, holding the gun and actually feeling that pump action and other stuff like it with the other Toy-Cons, that propels it above that entry-level experience for me. And I agree with you. The blaster was so cool. Definitely my favorite, personally, of the new Toy-Con for the VR kit. And yeah, it's, as you said, I just love that pump slide action. You get to pull the trigger. It feels great. It almost, and it's, of course, it's not like just a handheld gun. It's almost Super Scope 6-esque.
Yeah.
You don't hold it over your shoulder, of course, but it almost kind of feels like that. And it just feels great. It's definitely the most video gamey experience of all the Toy-Con, I think.
It is, absolutely. So, real quick, even though I think we have video of it running right here, and you're probably seeing video of it in 2D mode, which, by the way, most of these VR experiences are available in 2D, so if you don't want to use the goggles, you can, and it's also useful for filming, as you can see, so you can kind of see what we were doing. So, yeah, in this game, you don't really control your movement at all. Your character automatically goes through the environment pretty slowly, but as that's happening, you can spin around and aim anywhere you want. But what is probably one of the coolest things about this game is that you also have like this little toggle where if you flip the Joy-Con, like a little lever on the left side of the blaster, you enter like bullet time. So when you basically freeze time. So when you freeze time, you can like shoot as almost as many blasts as you want, and each one of your blasts are like explosive. So you can shoot a whole bunch, and they're just floating there in the air, kind of like how at the end of the Matrix when Neo freezes all the bullets in the air.
Yeah,
it's kind of like that. And then once you start up time again, they all fire at once, and they all just cause this massive explosion. You see like boxes flying everywhere. It is super cool. I love that.
Me too. That might have been my single favorite thing at the whole Labo VR Kit event, was that one gameplay mechanic in this game, because it feels so satisfying, and it's convincing too. It really feels like you're stopping time, setting up all these bullets to go where you want them to go, and then you just flip the switch and they all just go exactly where you wanted them to and just cause all this mayhem, and it's so fulfilling, and it's a really well implemented mechanic.
It is very satisfying indeed. All right, let's go ahead and move on to, I think, the Toy-Con camera, in which we got to play a game called, I think, Play Ocean Camera. And so this one reminded me a lot of one of the, I think, samples that came with the PSVR demo disc, where you're underwater, and like in that game you were underwater like in a cage, and you could look at like wildlife around you. And that was pretty much the same here. You're underwater, there's no cage, but there's wildlife swimming around you, and you can take pictures of them, which is neat. And to take pictures, again, you're holding the camera up to your face with the goggles included, and you can aim the camera at 360 degrees, up and down. And this is actually really where I started to appreciate like just how again immersive this could be. Like when you like look down, you see like the ocean floor underneath you. It's like, wow, this is pretty impressive for what's a cardboard VR device. And then to take pictures, there's like a little button on top, I think. You just snap that to take a picture, but you can also zoom in by rotating the lens itself in and out. And again, it's that tactile feedback that really kind of offers you something that most VR kind of doesn't. Again, in a very limited capacity, but it's neat. I like that.
No, I do too. I mean, and honestly, again, that was kind of probably my favorite part of the camera experience, was that tactile feedback. It really does feel like you're turning the lens on a real camera.
Because it clicks too, as you do it, I think.
And it
right?
clicks. Yeah, it's really neat. And it's in terms of the the game itself, I almost hesitate to call it a game because it's really almost just more of an experience. But this feels something more like a Street Pass type thing, where it's like limited gameplay engagement, but so it's kind of like there is a score element because you're trying to take the best pictures you can, but there's very limited actual gameplay engagement, and it's fun and it's really cool in a gee whiz sense. But this is where the Labo problem kind of starts to creep in my opinion, where how many times are you really going to want to do this? How much depth is there really here? No pun intended.
You beat me to it. How dare you?
Nice, yeah. But, that's where you get that issue creeping in, where it's like, okay, how many times am I going to want to use this with this cardboard thing that I've made? Otherwise, I'm just going to cast it aside, and is it going to be in the corner on the floor? Like, I just don't see this being something that most people are going to want to do more than a few times.
Yeah, I kind of agree, especially with what kind of annoyed me was, at least in the mode we played, I don't fully know how many modes there may have been in addition to what we played for each of these games, so I can't speak for all of them if there are more. But in this specific one, we could only take 3 pictures at a time, and as soon as it took 3 pictures, it kicked you out, which really annoyed me because I snapped 3 terrible ones. I'm like, oh, I'm done. Now, it wasn't too hard to get back into it, but it was just a little bit weird that you couldn't take more.
I agree, and the UI was a little slow and not very intuitive in terms of getting back into the action, so to speak. And I agree, only 3 pictures felt very limiting, and I don't know if there's another mode that, like a free play mode, that just lets you go and take as many pictures as you want and just kind of mess around. If there is, that I think is what they should have been demoing, because 3 pictures it feels like you have to make every shot count a lot, because you only get 3 and then you're done.
Exactly. Now, to help make every shot count, you can also throw bait out into the ocean. I forget I forget how that worked. There's some button to do it. And that would draw fish nearby, as well as apparently sharks too, according by what the Nintendo reps were telling us. We didn't see any sharks ourselves, but I think he did find like a robot or something underwater, Ash, like in the distance.
I did. Yeah, the game even specifically tells you that there are things to look out for, like, there are little Easter eggs to find, like in the distance of various parts of the ocean. So in that sense, it's cool. There are things to look for and not just fish. So, and I like that, and I did find that robot, and I took a picture, and it fulfilled an achievement. Like, I think it was like, take a picture of ruins long forgotten or something, I don't know. But I took a picture and I got an achievement for it. So there are objectives beyond just taking pictures of various fish that you can actually look for specific objects, but that too feels somewhat limited.
Yeah, it does. All right, let's go ahead and move on to another Toy Con, which is perhaps an even better example of how limited some of these games can be. And that is the wind pedal, which I kind of love. I love the wind pedal by itself. So before I get to it, though, the game we were playing with it, and it works with a couple of games. I believe also works in conjunction with the Bird Toy Con. But in the game we played specifically with the wind pedal, it was play, hop, dodge. Or just hop dodge. So in this game, you play as a frog. You're on a platform. So there's like this, there's like a robotic bear in front of you, like shooting like these balls at you, these bouncy balls. And as a frog, you have to time your jump in time to avoid the balls and land on top of them. And as you do that, the tower that you're on, the ball tower, keeps growing taller and taller until you get hit, I think, 3 times and run out of lives, and then it's game over. So you're just trying to stack the tower as high as you can by jumping, by hitting the wind pedal, which is just a pedal that you hit with your foot, and that causes you to jump. So it's just a pretty simple timing game. But what's awesome about this is every time you hit that pedal, it causes a gush of air to hit you in the face. And it sounds stupid, but it's surprisingly impressive or surprisingly effective in how it makes you feel like you're actually falling as the frog. Because by the time the wind gust hits you, you're already in the air as a frog and you're starting to fall back down onto this ball tower, and that's when you feel the gust of wind hit you. It's like, wow, that's super cool. It's super silly, but I love it.
That was definitely the coolest part of that game, which kind of tells you something, because the frog game itself, there's not much to it. You don't even move around. All you do is jump up and down, and that's the coolest part of it, is feeling that gust of air that makes you feel like you're really jumping up and down. But the game itself, like, I honestly can't see why I'd want to play this more than once. And that's kind of the problem, or maybe twice. But that's the thing, is that there's just not much to it. But yeah, what you've built and the wind pedal itself is really cool. And the fact that they engineered it such that you actually do get a burst of air is really neat. But I do have other issues with the wind pedal itself. Of course, it's made of cardboard, so it's obviously very light, and until you get used to it, you might be kicking it around. I definitely pushed it around a little bit, not intending to, just because I hadn't quite figured out exactly how I was supposed to step on it without moving it. But that's something you'll learn very quickly as you use it more and more. But it's just more about how limited it is. It's a very cool thing, but I just don't see myself and most people wanting to play that frog game more than a few times. Again, same with the camera.
Yeah, I mean, unless there's other modes there that we're not aware of. There's not a whole lot to do with it. It really is. I mean, that one felt pretty gimmicky. It's a cool gimmick, but a limited one. Yeah. So now the pedal does also work with the Toy-Con Bird, and specifically the game. I don't think I even have the name for it here. But basically, it's a game where you fly around as a bird, and you can apparently use a pedal to get a speed boost, and then that's when you feel the gust of air. I don't think either of us got to try that ourselves, though, the pedal part, right? Or did you, Ash?
No, I did briefly.
Okay.
I mean, I got to play like a few seconds of the Bird Toy-Con game, and I couldn't quite figure out how to actually speed up. Like, if you do the wind... Well, no, actually, I guess... No, you're right. I didn't get to play with the wind pedal.
Okay,
I just got to play with the Bird Toy-Con by itself. So it must be the wind pedal that gives you a burst of speed.
So the way this game works is you're holding the bird to your face. You're looking into its rear end, basically, with the goggles. And there's these little... You can flap its wings by pressing these levers on the side of the Toy-Con itself. So that controls the bird. You can steer by looking around, I believe. So if you look up, you go up. You look down, you go down. I think going down might give you a speed boost as well, if I recall correctly. And I think you flap to actually gain altitude as well, right? Or you speed up, I guess, maybe. I'm trying to remember exactly how that worked.
Well, I thought so, but for the few seconds that I played, I was struggling to figure out how to go faster, because I was flapping, but that only increased my altitude, and it didn't feel like it was making me go any faster.
Okay. So yeah, maybe that was its altitude. So yeah, it's hard to remember exactly what was happening. I thought it felt overall good from what I remembered. But it, again, is pretty limited too. Like, there's these simple objectives you can complete. In one case, I found like an egg and I hatched it, I think, and I had to go feed the baby bird that came out by grabbing apples in the environment. There's also like a simple map you can bring up by holding both of the wings down for a second. That kind of shows you the whole island you're on. You can look for more things to do. So this one actually reminded me a little bit of the Toy-Con vehicle kit, where you also had an island with a bunch of objectives to do. I'm guessing it's not anywhere near that in depth, but it did remind me of that on a smaller scale, where you have this island, you go around, do things as this bird, and it's more in just kind of like, a lot of it's just in taking in the sights, flying around, getting a bird's eye view literally on this island and seeing what that's like to be able to fly in VR.
That's a great way to put it. It does kind of feel like the vehicle kit, but less involved in a gameplay sense. It almost kind of feels like a Pilot Wings game, where you're playing one of the modes where you just get to kind of tour around the island and just play for fun and not really have to like fly through any rings or land on any targets, just kind of tour the sights. Something else it also reminded me of, and this is totally random, but in the Wind Waker, you can put fruit on your head to take control of these seagulls on certain islands.
I was thinking that
and
too.
this kind of feels like a VR version of that.
It totally does. I was thinking the exact same thing.
Nice.
Yeah, so that actually is kind of cool. Because that was actually a pretty neat part of the original game, if also limited. So yeah,
right.
I don't fully know what to make of this one yet, because it seemed like it may have the more depth than a lot of the others, but we didn't have too much time with it. But yeah, I mean, it seemed pretty neat. So
yeah, no, I enjoyed it. Like I said, I only got to play it for a few seconds, but what's there, I enjoyed, and it's because we didn't play it very long, it's hard to know how much more is there, but I would say this one has potential in terms of what we might not have played.
All right, let's go on to what also might be, for me at least, one of the more impressive ones, and that is the Toy-Con Elephant. And this is, as we expected, it's a 3D drawing game done only the way Nintendo can, where you hold this elephant head up to your face with the goggles inside, of course, as usual, and then you hold on to the trunk extending from it, and that trunk is what's holding on to like a pencil or whatever you're using to draw, and then you can actually draw in 3D space, because the Toy-Cons or the Joy-Cons are actually measuring the distance of the trunk from your face using the IR pointer. You can tell exactly where it is in 3D space, and it's remarkably accurate. Like, this is actually super impressive, like how good or how well it works for, again, being cardboard. So real quick, it's actually pretty similar to some other 3D drawing tools we've seen on other VR units. And in this case, you have, like, if you look down at your knees in virtual space, you have like your whole like toolbox in front of you. You can choose different colors, different tools to create things, like you can draw circles in space using like a Mario Paint like tool. You can also grab your entire creation and move it around like wherever you want, so you can kind of readjust it. And yeah, it has like actual depth to it. Like, you're actually drawing in a 3D space. You're not just drawing on like a flat surface in 3D space. You're drawing you're drawing these lines and whatever else in actual 3 dimensions. So it's kind of crazy to wrap your head around. And I was terrible at it. I made like a GX logo, and then the rest is just a disaster. But what do you think of it, Ash?
Same here. Like, conceptually, it's very cool, and I've actually tried something like this in the Vive before, and it was very cool there as well. And yeah, this is obviously kind of a lower 5 version of that, but it's really neat being able to not only draw these. You can draw in 3D space, you can place shapes like circles and squares in 3D space, and then you can manipulate them. You can grab hold of them and move them around in 3D space, and it's really, really neat as a concept. And I think it's something, this is the kind of thing I'd want to go back into and kind of mess around with several times. But I did notice, at least for me, that it felt a little finicky sometimes, especially when trying to grab different tools to use, because you have to look down, like all of your whole tool set is kind of below you, so you have to look down and grab a tool to use it. And for me, it felt a little finicky in terms of where in 3D space you're supposed to be to grab that tool. So it wasn't a perfect experience for me, but it was definitely a good one. And I have to say that also might have just been me. That might have just been me not quite being used to what I need to be doing to kind of just be effective in that space.
Right.
And so I don't want to blame it on the game necessarily. That may have just been me kind of, and we're also kind of in a cramped area. We've got people around us. We don't want to knock the other Toy-Con off the table. I was trying not to be too wild with my movements.
Yeah, I actually thought it worked remarkably well for me. So I didn't have to me, like, I didn't have any tracking issues with it at all. I found it to be quite accurate. The only slight thing I did notice is that, like, as part of a limitation of Labo VR, you can't really like lean into your creations. Like, if you want to, you can only really spin around and get and look at it with in 360 degrees. You can like lean forward for a different perspective on it, which is something you probably could do in the other VR systems. So not a huge deal. I still thought it was extremely impressive, but just want to mention that, like, showing, as one of the limitations of Labo VR, because I'm not sure if you can really lean forward in any other games.
I don't think you do, actually.
Yeah, so it's not really something that even factors in. But yeah, just thought I would throw it out there. The only other thing real quick is, while I thought most of the toy cons felt really well built, this one seemed to be the one with the most potential to go wrong. Like, it felt like it was pretty loosely connected at points, and it felt like one that could maybe be, broken or damaged easier than the others in some way. So, like, it could be torn or something.
I agree. Like, I even had trouble, like, trying to figure out exactly how to hold it at first. To get, like, the Nintendo rep had to help me, because I'm like, this is such a weird, unwieldy feeling Toy-Con that I'm like, how do I even hold this thing? And that one definitely feels like it has the most potential just to fall apart on you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, and who knows if it would or not. It seemed like it might.
Right.
So, yeah. Well, let's go and move on to the final part of the experience we gotta try, and that was the VR Plaza. And again, as I said at the beginning, this is where there are 64 pre-built games that Nintendo's creators themselves made, or Nintendo's developers themselves made, which they're all they seem to be all entirely unique experiences built using the Labo Garage. So you can, again, modify these experiences yourselves or build your own. And what we saw, we didn't see too many of them, but what we did see looked really promising. So one of them was like a 2D platformer where you're looking at this kind of giant wall in front of you, and within that wall is a stage for a platform where you're controlling this little stick figure-like guy, and you have to, control him to move across the platforms, you jump gaps, and climb up this tall structure in which you have to look up and down and all around in order to fully take it in. And this was really neat. It was awesome that you can make a platformer in Labo using these tools in VR.
Yeah, I really like this. I mean, of course, I'm a platformer fan in general, so I'm biased toward it, but I really enjoyed this. It's so cool that you can make a fully functioning 2D platformer with all these cool three-dimensional obstacles and such and moving parts in VR, or in the Toy-Con Garage VR. That's so neat, and it played like a fully functioning platformer. It didn't feel like you were playing anything that was limited, or like it was just, it's a part of a platformer. It's like, no, it's a full game. I don't know how many stages there are, but you can build your own in the Garage VR kit. And yeah, I thought it was really cool. I had to get a little bit of a handle on it first, because the jumping, it's funny, it's very much like Castlevania. So it's like when you jump, you have to commit to it,
it's
because you can't
based.
change your inertia.
Yep.
Yeah, you can't change your inertia in midair like you can in Mega Man or Mario. So so I needed to get used to it, but it's really cool, and I like the idea that you really do have to utilize, you really have to look around to, get the views that you need to get through the course, and I really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, no, it was really neat. It showed part of the potential of what you can do in Garage, or in Labo Garage. And another game we tried also showed the potential by being something completely different, which was VR Plaza Car Battle. So in this one, you basically control a remote control truck. It has a hammer on top, which you can go around, and the goal is to smash up the opponent that's just kind of driving around. I don't think he was trying to attack you too. Maybe it was, I don't remember. But the goal was to just drive up to him and smash him. And you're looking down at this arena from kind of a top-down perspective. And yeah, again, it just kind of showed how different of an experience you can make by building this car combat-based game where the other car had some limited AI, it seemed, and you're controlling your own car and just going around trying to hammer stuff, and you can interact with other things in the environment too. And my favorite part was the fact that they had actually built or written instructions for the game in the environment itself using blocks and letters, and I drove up to it to smash the hell out of it. I'm like, yes, that's awesome, take that instructions.
I love that you can do that. Yeah, I thought this was really cool too. It was neat because you're in this, of course, this VR space, and like you said, I love that you can smash the instructions, and yeah, you've kind of got these tank-like controls where you have to go forward and reverse, and that changes depending relative to the position where you are on the screen. And it kind of reminded me of one of the tank mini games from Mario Party, and I couldn't tell you which one it was from since there are 18 different ones now. Yeah. But it reminded me of that, and yeah, I thought it was really cool. And something that occurred to me after I played actually was that the hammer that you have attached to your car that you have to go to use to smash the other cars it works pretty much exactly like the hammer item in Mario Kart Arcade GP VR, what I played in Japan last year. And that was like an exclusive item to that game where you're going around and you're hammering the carts around you, and it works exactly like that. So I don't know if it's intentional or not, but I thought that was kind of a weird coincidence.
That's pretty funny. Both two Nintendo VR experiences that have this similar mechanic. That's pretty cool. Yeah. So again, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of depth to this experience, but it was neat to show what all you can do with it. And as part of that, we played another game, another VR Plaza game. I don't know what the name of this one was, but it was basically foosball. Kind of. We each controlled. It was like soccer, or if you will, where you and I were playing on the Switch itself. There was no VR involved in this. We each grabbed a side. We controlled 2 players apiece. They moved together, which is what reminded me of foosball. And we were trying to kick the goal into the other player, or we're trying to kick the ball into the other player's goal, I think, or destroy their goal, I think. We each had a block or something we're trying to destroy. Is that right?
I believe so, yeah. That sound, we played it for such a short amount of time that it's hard to remember.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it was pretty cool. It was neat that you could make a multiplayer game using Labo Garage VR. The only weird thing is it doesn't involve VR at all. There was no VR here.
Right, and that's the thing. Is it like as fun as it was, and I enjoyed. Foosball's always fun, and it was fun holding opposite sides of the Switch and playing competitively against you. There's no VR element. Like, you could just this could be a regular Switch game, and nobody would be none the wiser about it. Like, so I don't. As fun as it was, I'm not quite convinced that it needs to be part of one of the 64 games in this VR Plaza. And that's kind of, I guess, what I'm a little concerned about, is as much as I love the idea of having 64 different experiences in the VR Plaza built by Nintendo for you to enjoy. It's almost like a VR concept of Super Mario Maker's 100 Mario Challenge, where you have like the official courses, and then you can go make your own. But I do wonder how many of the 64 games are going to be like this, where maybe they're not actually dependent on VR, and that would be a little disappointing to me. So the game itself, really fun, but where's the connection to VR,
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. I kind of agree with it on the one hand. It's a little bit weird you can make these experiences, these VR experiences, and or these experiences with Labo VR and have it not be VR based at all. And I do wonder how many of them are in this as well. But on the other hand, I kind of like that too. Like, I think it shows like how seemingly powerful the garage is in this game, and it kind of excites me because it opens up the possibilities for what we can do with it. I mean, so for one, so this looks like it goes well beyond the garage of any other Labo, in which I don't think I even saw really anyone play around with those. But this one has potential because, for one, it has a pre-built-in option, so you can see how it works and you can even dive in and edit those yourself, which can give you ideas or show you how to create your own experiences. And I think being able to take outside of VR not only makes it more social, but just makes it more accessible in general as well. That you're not limited to just VR games, but you can do other stuff too. So I kind of like that idea. Like, I have a feeling most of them will be VR focused, but I like how it's not locked specifically to VR because the tools themselves extend beyond it. So I kind of like that idea.
No, that's a good point. No, that's actually a great point, and I do agree with that. And that something you said also extends to Labo VR in general, which is it's just more social in general than other VR, or than something like PlayStation VR or Vive, because yes, you're looking through goggles and you've got these things up to your face, but you're holding them up to your face. You're not strapped in.
Right.
So there's not a wall between you and whoever else is in the room with you. You can pull them away from your face whenever you want. So in a sense, they just, even passively, they feel more social and inviting than a more traditional hardcore VR experience. And something else you said kind of goes back to the garage mechanics, and I love that not only can you obviously make your own stuff by, deciding what goes where, and if this happens, then this happens. That's cool by itself, but I love how you can take any of the 64 games and look at how they've been built in that interface and understand how everything fits together, so you can then either go tweak the game to your liking or go make something completely that's your own with that understanding of how things fit together.
I'm looking at this picture here, and one of the options they show for the Plaza is like a pinball game, and hell yes, I'm all about that. I want to make a pinball table. So yeah, I mean, this actually excites me. Like, Garage always sounded like a cool concept for Labo, but it never really went anywhere, and this one might finally be the device that does it. Like, it almost reminds me a little bit of dreams, like on a on a smaller, more limited scale, obviously. But you can essentially make your own games here. Like that's awesome. Like that's really cool. So I really
like I wasn't expecting that. Like with the Toy Gun Garage, it's one thing because it's like this really neat engineering venture where you can like try to make your own games mechanically, but they're still fairly traditional games. I never expected that Nintendo would enable you to make your own VR games using Labo. Like that's really neat.
Yeah, it's super neat. So I'm actually really excited for that. I love, people know that I love Mario Maker because it's creative. You can create all kinds of things, like whatever you can imagine within the tool set you can do. And this one looks to have even, it looks to be offer an even wider array of experiences. So yeah, I can't wait to see what all you can do with it. And speaking actually real quick, you brought the point of how like it is more social, like you're not locked into this environment. You can just lower your arms and you're out of it. And as part of that too, there does seem to be a bit of a multiplayer focus here. We specifically got to try ourselves a hippo game briefly using the Blaster Toy-Con, in which you can like suck up fruit and then aim them at hippos. And you're trying to feed as many hippos at once as possible, I believe. And then once you're done, you pass it to your friend, and then they start doing the same as well, and you're competing for a higher score. So we didn't get a whole lot of time with it, but it was kind of fun. It was neat to see that how this is a little bit more social than most VR, as you said.
Yeah, I will say that particular game didn't do much for me, but that we also got all of like 10 seconds to play
Pretty
it.
much.
So
I wanted,
yeah, and I guess that might be the one thing to bring up as we close out is that it the event was an hour. It was literally an hour long, maybe a little longer, to play all these different experiences. And you and I were talking about how we couldn't help but wonder if maybe the reason it was such a short event for such a wide array of things to do was maybe because there isn't a whole lot of
maybe that's
in some of these experiences.
Right.
So there is that to think about.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, we know there are the 64 Plaza games, and if each one offers even a couple minutes of gameplay, that's not a terrible value right there. But when it comes to the main,
that's true.
But when it comes to the main experiences, that is what concerns me a little bit. Like how many times are you going to want to play through the Blaster, segment? How many levels are there to it? How many times do you want to take pictures underwater? So these are questions we don't fully have answers to. I think some of these games will have more longevity than the others. And again, I think the Plaza is the thing with the most potential, possibly, or the Garage as well. I really, can't wait to see what all people create with that. So I guess Ash, to wrap it up, final thoughts on Labo. Anything else you want to get out there that you haven't already? What's your summary of this based on what we played?
Like I said at the beginning, this ended up being a little bit more than what I expected. It was very much meant to be entry level VR, and that's what we're getting here. But it's a step above that. It's not pure entry level. It's definitely a step above, and just the fact that it's VR stuff, but you're also making it yourself in terms of you're putting the Toy-Con together, and, VR or not, that continues to impress me. The fact that you put together these incredibly complicated cardboard instructions with very specific instructions from Nintendo, and everything just works.
Yeah.
VR or not, I still think that concept is really cool. And then when you apply that to VR as well, it's just amplified that much more. So the appeal of Labo itself is still very much alive in this VR kit. It's so cool to make these things and just have them work. But at the same time, buyer beware, because do not try to make all these at once. Take it from Andre and me, our 12-hour stream. Don't do it.
Yeah, don't do it.
Pace yourself.
Yeah, definitely pace yourself.
Pace yourself, yeah.
You brought up a good point. Like, I still think Labo is a super cool concept, and these specific devices, for the most part, felt like remarkably solid, like Labo typically has. Like these, even though they are cardboard, it feels like it felt fine using the VR goggles and these other devices. Like, and the things that they pulled off with them, again, like the blaster and how you feel that thunk of shooting of launching your, grenades or whatever. It's super cool. So I'm right there with you. And it was interesting, though, that this was the first Labo event I've been to where we didn't actually build anything ourselves. They were all pre-built. Probably because, like, we've had experience with it now, so they don't need to show that part anymore. I just thought that was a little bit interesting, where it's like, no, you know how it works. Here's a VR part now. Here's how that's going to work. So
Right. And I guess one other thing to say is how they're releasing it is pretty cool too, because you can buy the full set with all the Toy-Con for $80, or you can buy the starter set, which is just the basic VR goggles with the blaster for, I believe, $40. Mm-hmm. And then you can get the expansion set 1, which has the camera and the elephant, for $20, as well as the second expansion set separately, which has the bird and the wind pedal for $20. So, based on what we said here, if you're like, I'm not really sure, this sounds like it could be cool, but maybe there's not enough depth, you could just get the starter set with the blaster and experience what we think is the best of VR, Toy-Con VR so far. And then, if you like it, check out the other ones. But you don't have to jump in with both feet if you're not quite sure.
Exactly. Yep, right there with you. Final question, Ash, because I think this is something a lot of people wonder about inherently with VR. Did you ever feel motion sickness at any point, or disoriented, or odd in any way while playing with Labo VR?
Not at all. And I will say that that's not something that typically happens to me in general. I was also not one of those people who had problems using the 3D and the 3DS for any amount of time. So I may not be the best person to ask, but I didn't have any motion sickness issues. And I think the only time I ever did was when I went to some indie game gala, and I played an Oculus game, and I felt really, really, almost violently ill about 5 minutes in, and I had to go to the bathroom. And that's never happened to me with any other VR type thing, including this. So I don't know what was with that Oculus game, but this was no problem.
Yeah, so I'm pretty immune to like motion sickness in general. Like I've had like even that that Vive game where you're basically Spider-Man, like web slinging around. Like I had no issues with that, whereas like my friend Tom, like he felt sick instantly from it. So I don't know if I'm the best gauge for this either, but I had no issues with this at all. And I think the fact that it's primarily like, you know, at least the way we experienced it was a sitting experience. Like, you know, we're rotating in our chairs. Obviously, you can play a standing up too, but you're still just rotating in place. So it's not quite as physical as some other VRs. Some other VR units, so I don't think it's as big of a concern. And even in the games where like you are moving to some degree, such as like in the Blaster game where you are walking through an environment, which can cause motion sickness, you know, because you're not moving in real life, it's slow enough that I don't think it'll be much of an issue. But even if it is, as we said at the beginning, or near the beginning, most of these experiences do allow you to play it in 2D as well. So you just take off the goggle part, you can play it on the screen as if it were a normal Switch game, and you'd be none the wiser that VR is even involved.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that about wraps up for our Labo VR. Wow, that got way more in depth than I expected it to. So
me too.
We talked almost as long as we spent playing it, Ash. So
yeah, I wasn't expecting that, but I guess, you know, that kind of betrays the idea that there is a little more to this than you might have been expecting. And no, I mean, in general, it was a very cool experience, and I'm looking forward to seeing what people create with this.
Yeah, same here. Like, I'm kind of a sucker for gimmicks. Like, I think gimmicks can be fun, and I did enjoy what I played here for the most part. Some of those games like work surprisingly well, as I said. Again, go in with the expectation the image quality is going to be lower than other VR units, but for what it is, it's surprisingly impressive. The question remains, how much gameplay is there actually here? How much longevity is there to it? But again, that Plaza looked really promising, so we'll see. And with that, I think we're about done here. So thank you so much for watching. If you liked the discussion, make sure to like and follow us on Facebook and Twitter at GameXplain. You can find links to those in the description below. And of course, click that subscribe button if you haven't already for hopefully more on Labo VR at some point and everything else Nintendo Switch as well. We'll catch you later. Bye.